Your phone buzzes. One new message. K. That's it. One letter, no emoji, no explanation, no second message. And somehow, your stomach drops. You read it once. Then again, maybe they're annoyed. Maybe they're busy. Maybe you said something wrong. Maybe they don't want to talk anymore. Within 10 seconds, your brain has written an entire story from a single character on a screen. The strange part? You already know how ridiculous it sounds. You know it's probably nothing. You know you're overthinking. And yet, you can't stop. You check when they were last online. You reread your previous message. You wonder if you should send another text or pretend you don't care. Almost everyone has done this. A delayed reply, a missing emoji, a period at the end of a sentence, 3 dots that appear, then disappear. Tiny things. Yet somehow they can ruin an entire evening. But why? Why can something so small trigger emotions that feel so real? Because the problem was never the text message. The problem is that your brain was never designed to understand one. For almost all of human history, communication was impossible to misunderstand this badly. You saw people's faces, you heard their voices, you noticed tiny pauses, a raised eyebrow, a smile that lasted half a second longer than usual. Your brain evolved to read thousands of tiny signals simultaneously. Then, almost overnight, we replaced all of that with glowing words on a screen. No facial expression, no tone, no body language, just black letters. And a brain desperately trying to guess everything that was missing. That's where the trouble begins. Because the human brain hates one thing more than almost anything else. Not failure, not rejection, uncertainty. If you tell someone bad news, their brain reacts. If you tell them good news, their brain reacts. But give it no answer at all. And it refuses to let go. This wasn't discovered through texting. It was discovered decades before smartphones even existed. A psychologist asked people to complete a series of simple tasks. Nothing emotional, nothing stressful. Halfway through, she interrupted them. The tasks were left unfinished. Days later, something strange happened. People remembered the interrupted tasks far better than the ones they had completed. Finished tasks quietly disappeared from memory. Unfinished ones refused to leave. Psychologists eventually gave this phenomenon a name, the Zeigarnik Effect. Your brain treats unfinished information like an open tab it forgot to close. It keeps checking, keeps returning, keeps searching for an ending. Now, think about a text message. You send one. Nothing happens. 5 minutes pass. Then 30. Then 2 hours. Your brain doesn't see no reply yet. It sees unfinished, an open loop, a question with no answer. And your mind starts doing exactly what it evolved to do. Trying to finish the story. Maybe they're angry. Maybe they're disappointed. Maybe they're losing interest. Maybe they're writing the perfect reply. Maybe they forgot. Maybe they saw it and chose not to answer. None of these thoughts are based on evidence. They're based on something much older. Your brain would rather invent an answer than live without one. And that's when things become dangerous. Because the stories your brain invents almost always lean in one direction. The worst one. Not because you're negative, not because you're insecure. Because that's how survival works. Imagine standing alone in a forest 200,000 years ago. You hear something moving in the bushes. There are 2 possibilities. It's the wind, or it's a predator. If your brain assumes it's the wind, and it's wrong, you die. If your brain assumes it's a predator, and it's wrong, you waste a few seconds. Evolution doesn't reward optimism. It rewards caution, generation after generation. The brains that survived were the ones that expected danger first. That same survival system is still inside you today. Only the bushes have changed. Now, the rustling leaves are replaced by scene 8:42 p.m. The tiger became typing, then nothing. Your brain reacts exactly the same way. Not because texting is dangerous, because uncertainty always has been. And here's the disturbing part. Your nervous system doesn't actually care whether the threat is physical or social. To your ancient brain, being ignored by your group wasn't embarrassing, it was life-threatening. If your tribe stopped speaking to you, you didn't feel lonely. You died. No protection, no food, no shelter, no one watching while you slept. Being excluded wasn't an emotional inconvenience, it was a survival problem, which means your brain evolved to treat social silence like physical danger. And that's why one unanswered message can feel so much bigger than it really is. But this still doesn't explain the strangest part. If every human brain fears uncertainty, why do some people shrug off a delayed reply, while others spiral for hours, sometimes days, over a single word? The answer has almost nothing to do with texting, and everything to do with the invisible blueprint your brain built long before you ever picked up a phone. Not everyone reacts to a text message the same way. Some people glance at their phone, see seen, shrug, and move on with their day. Others can't. They check their phone every 5 minutes. They reread the conversation from the beginning. They wonder if they sounded too cold, too desperate, too interested, too distant. They even start rewriting conversations that already happened. So what makes the difference? Surprisingly, it isn't confidence. It isn't intelligence. It isn't age. It starts much earlier than that. Long before smartphones, long before texting, long before you ever fell in love. Somewhere in childhood, your brain quietly learned one simple lesson. What does love feel like? Not what love should feel like. What it actually felt like. For some people, love felt predictable. Someone comforted them when they cried. Someone came back when they left the room. Someone made the world feel safe. Their nervous system learned something powerful. People leave, and they come back. For others, the lesson was different. Sometimes affection was there, sometimes it disappeared. Sometimes warmth turned into silence without warning. Sometimes love had to be earned. Their brain learned a completely different rule. If someone pulls away, something is wrong. That lesson doesn't stay in childhood. It quietly follows you into adulthood, into friendships, into relationships, and eventually into your text messages. This is what psychologists call attachment style. It's one of the strongest predictors of how your brain reacts to uncertainty. Someone with a secure attachment might see a delayed reply and think they're probably busy. Then they continue with their day. Someone with an anxious attachment sees the exact same delay, and their nervous system starts sounding an alarm. Did I upset them? Should I apologize? Are they losing interest? Should I send another message? Nothing has changed except the story inside their head. The phone didn't create the anxiety. It revealed it. But attachment style is only half of the story. Because something even stranger happens once your brain notices uncertainty. It begins filling in the missing information. Not with facts, with imagination. Imagine someone hands you a book. Half the pages are missing. Would your brain simply accept that? Probably not. Without realizing it, you'd begin guessing what happened. Who betrayed who? Who survived? How the story ends. The human brain hates missing information. Text messages create that problem constantly. Someone replies with, fine, fine. How? Happy, angry, sarcastic, exhausted. You have no idea. So your brain starts writing the missing pages itself. Psychologists call this ambiguity intolerance. Your brain would rather invent an explanation than admit it doesn't have one. And here's where it becomes almost unfair. The explanation it invents usually isn't positive. It rarely thinks, they're probably making dinner, or they're driving, or they're taking a nap. Instead, it chooses the explanation that would have kept your ancestors alive. Maybe something is wrong. Maybe they're upset. Maybe you've been rejected. Maybe danger is coming. This is known as negativity bias. Your brain naturally gives more weight to possible threats than possible comforts. Not because life is terrible, because surviving depended on noticing danger first. For thousands of generations, missing one real threat was far more expensive than imagining 10 that weren't there. Today, the predators are gone, but the brain still scans every situation the same way, including your messages. That's why one tiny word, K, can somehow feel heavier than an entire conversation. But there's another problem texting creates, one our ancestors never had to deal with. Imagine talking to someone face to face. Even before they speak, your brain is already collecting information. Their eyes, their breathing, the speed of their reply, the way their shoulders move, whether they're smiling, whether they're nervous. Every conversation is full of signals. Now remove all of them. No face, no voice, no eye contact, no pauses you can actually hear. No smile, no laugh, no warmth, just 12 black letters on a glowing rectangle. Your brain suddenly loses almost everything it normally uses to understand another human being. So what does it do? It improvises, sometimes correctly, often completely wrong. Have you ever received a message, read it in an angry voice, only to discover later the sender wasn't angry at all? Nothing changed about the message, only the voice inside your own head. That's because every text message is secretly written twice, once by the sender, and once again by your imagination. Which version you believe depends far more on your emotional state than on the actual words. Someone feeling calm reads, okay. Someone feeling anxious reads, okay. Same message, different brain, different reality. This is why texting creates misunderstandings so easily. Not because people communicate badly, because the brain refuses to tolerate empty space. It fills every silence, every pause, every missing emotion, even if it has to invent one. And then something happened that made all of this dramatically worse. It wasn't psychology, it wasn't social media, it wasn't smartphones, it was two tiny blue check marks. Before read receipts existed, silence meant almost anything. Maybe they never saw it. Maybe their phone died. Maybe they were asleep. Your brain had possibilities. Then, suddenly, technology removed them. Now you don't just know your message arrived. You know they saw it. And then, nothing. No explanation, no context, just silence. To a modern app, that's information. To your ancient nervous system, it's rejection. A feature designed to improve communication accidentally amplified one of humanity's oldest fears. But even that isn't the strangest discovery. Researchers eventually found something even more unsettling. The real source of the anxiety was never the text, never the check marks, never even the delayed reply. It was something much deeper, something the human brain struggles with more than almost anything else, not knowing. And once you understand why uncertainty feels so unbearable, you'll never look at your phone the same way again. Researchers eventually discovered something that completely changed how psychologists think about uncertainty. Human beings don't fear bad news nearly as much as they fear not knowing. Imagine your doctor walks into a room. There are only two possibilities. He says, "Everything looks fine," or "We found something." Both create emotion, but imagine a third option. He walks in, looks at your file, and says, "We'll know in a few weeks." For most people, that's the hardest one to live with. Not because it's worse, because the brain can't stop trying to solve it. Uncertainty is like an itch. Your mind cannot scratch. That's exactly what's happening when someone doesn't reply. Your brain doesn't know whether everything is fine or whether something has gone terribly wrong. So it keeps searching. Every 5 minutes, you check your phone. Not because you're expecting a reply, because your brain keeps asking the same unanswered question. Has the story changed yet? This is why people refresh WhatsApp, open Instagram, lock the phone, unlock it again 30 seconds later. Nothing changed, except the hope that maybe, this time, there'll finally be an answer. Ironically, bad news often ends the suffering much faster than silence ever does. A breakup hurts. Being rejected hurts. But eventually, your brain closes the file. Silence doesn't let it. Silence keeps the file open, hour after hour, day after day. And that's why one tiny feature changed modern communication more than almost anyone realizes. Read receipts, typing indicators, online, last seen. Tiny pieces of information. None of them were designed to hurt you. Yet, together, they accidentally created the perfect environment for an ancient brain to panic. Think about it. Thousands of years ago, if someone looked directly at you, then deliberately walked away, your brain would immediately assume something important had changed. Today, a blue check mark creates the exact same feeling. They saw me. Why didn't they answer? Did I do something wrong? Should I text again? Should I apologize? Should I pretend I don't care? Every one of those questions exists because your brain cannot tolerate an unfinished story. But here's something even stranger. Your brain isn't actually trying to understand the other person. It's trying to protect you from rejection, from exclusion, from uncertainty. The problem is, it uses the oldest software imaginable to solve a very modern problem. Your nervous system doesn't know what a smartphone is. It doesn't know what read receipts are. It doesn't understand texting culture. As far as it's concerned, silence still means exactly what it meant hundreds of thousands of years ago. Something about your place in the tribe may have changed. That's why your heart races. That's why your stomach tightens. That's why one delayed reply can ruin an entire afternoon. Not because the message was powerful, because your survival system believes it might be. But here's the part that changed everything for neuroscientists. They discovered that although your threat detection system can't simply be turned off, it can be interrupted. Not by positive thinking, not by pretending you don't care, but by recognizing what your brain is doing while it's doing it. The moment you notice yourself creating stories, pause. Ask one question. What do I actually know? Not what you fear, not what you imagine. What do you actually know? Usually, the answer is surprisingly small. You know they haven't replied. That's it. Everything else is a story your brain wrote to close an unfinished loop. That simple realization changes something remarkable. The uncertainty doesn't disappear, but your relationship with it does. Instead of believing every thought, you begin watching your brain generate them. The alarm is still ringing, but now you recognize it as an alarm, not reality. Psychologists sometimes describe this as creating distance between yourself and your thoughts. Because thoughts aren't facts, they're predictions. And prediction is exactly what the human brain evolved to do. Sometimes brilliantly, sometimes terribly. Which brings us back to that tiny message. K. Maybe they were annoyed. Maybe they were exhausted. Maybe they were walking into a meeting. Maybe their battery died. Maybe they simply didn't know what else to say. The truth is, you don't know, and neither does your brain. It only hates admitting that. That's why it fills silence with stories. It mistakes uncertainty for danger, and it convinces you that imagination is evidence. But the next time your phone buzzes, and your mind immediately starts writing a tragedy from a single word. Remember this. You're not reading the message. You're reading the spaces between the words. Spaces your brain has spent 200,000 years trying to fill. Not because you're weak, not because you're insecure, because uncertainty once meant survival, and evolution never expected one day you'd spend your evenings trying to decode emotions through 12 glowing letters on a 6-inch screen. Maybe that's the strangest part of all. The greatest communication technology in human history accidentally exposed one of the oldest flaws in the human mind. Not our inability to speak, our inability to tolerate not knowing. So the next time someone leaves you on seen before your brain writes the ending, remember something it almost always forgets. Silence isn't evidence. It's empty space. An empty space is where imagination becomes louder than reality.